Joining us now, Corey Lewandowski. He was campaign manager for Donald Trump 2016, engineered the biggest upset victory in the primaries ever. Now, I can go on with all the stuff he's done, and he's a best-selling author, New York Times bestseller, and all that good stuff. But everybody in New Hampshire tuned in on pins and needles. Is Corey Lewandowski going to run for Senate in New Hampshire? Everybody wants to know. They're all on pins and needles. Corey, welcome.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
So, Corey Lewandowski, is he going to be a Senate candidate from New Hampshire?
Well, John, look, I've been very encouraged by the public polling data which has come out in this last week. The polls, both WMUR and Emerson, show that if I get in the race, not only am I the clear front runner, but I think I'll have the opportunity to win and take back a Senate seat in New Hampshire for the people that's been hijacked over the last 12 years from a U.S. Senator who votes more with AOC and the far Democrats, people of New Hampshire. And this is a person who has gotten very rich while in public service. This is a person who voted against Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. And this is a person who believes in funding sanctuary cities, none of which I think the people of New Hampshire agree with.
So, look, every indication says if you run, you're going to be the nominee. If you're going to be the nominee, you're going to win. I mean, I've been telling you that since the day you suggested it. If you run, you win. I know you're getting closer as family considerations, but you got to be encouraged when you get two polls recently out, but both show you ahead big for the nomination. When are we going to see Corey Lewandowski make a decision?
Well, John, today's a day that and I think your listeners know has impacted my family in remarkable ways. The tragedies of 9/11 is something because of the planes that came out of Boston, my friends who are on those planes, and the way it's impacted my family. Today's a day where I'm going to remember those things. And while politics is important, we have to remember what's most important. And thinking back on the tragedy of 9/11 today, on the 18-year anniversary, and reminding the people who don't remember it the way we do, that we can never allow this to happen again, and that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and all those people who were responsible for that 9/11 incident should be brought to justice and ultimately executed, in my opinion. So, as much as I look forward to very much making a decision and very, very likely entering the U.S. Senate race in New Hampshire, I just won't be making that announcement today because out of respect for the 9/11 families and the victims, I'm going to spend my time today remembering those people and hoping that we have every resolve to never let that happen again.
Corey, where were you on 9/11 when the second airplane hit?
John, on September 11th of 2001, I was living in Connecticut working for the Republican National Committee as a Northeast political director, and it just so happened I left my home very, very early that morning, and I drove down to my office in Trenton, New Jersey, because New Jersey was having the off-year elections, and I was working down there. And as I drove, I was listening to my car radio, as everybody does when they commute in, and heard of the chaos that was transpiring. And I remember driving over the Tappan Zee Bridge, and as your listeners know, and it's now been well documented, it was a crystal clear day. And as I drove over the Tappan Zee Bridge in New York, I could look to my left as I drove south, and I could see the Twin Towers burning as I made my way down to Trenton, New Jersey, where I then stayed in the hotel room waiting for information like everybody else before I turned around and left that hotel room with the terrible news that one of my colleagues in college, a close friend and family friend for growing up, was on one of those planes, as were many other of our friends, Flight 175. And I turned around and went back home and started to attend funerals for the people who were killed on 9/11 shortly thereafter.
What a sad day. And for those that just get the geography, the Tappan Zee Bridge, I'm from New Jersey. That is coming into New Jersey from New York. It's west of the city. It connects with the Garden State Parkway, but it is in a semi-rural area in kind of upstate northwest New Jersey as the parkway winds itself up there. And it's a very high bridge. So I could see where you're coming over it. You just look to your left heading south, you'd be able to see that because of the terrain. So quite the image not a lot of people that were not in New York or the New Jersey area actually saw that with their own eyes. So the horrific day that was. So I certainly respect your view on taking this week to reflect on the loved ones and your friends that you lost. So I certainly understand that, Corey. Definitely. Let's get
But John, it's so important, right, that everyone remembers it, because I read a piece this morning that said writing about 9/11 in today's terms, 18 years later, is the equivalent of writing about World War II in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a senior in high school, you weren't even born during 9/11, mm-hmm. and it's this thing that you heard about. But for those of us who lived it and were directly impacted by it, it puts things into perspective. And I think I'm a person, John, who lives in the moment and tries to live their life to the fullest. But it's a very humbling thing to look back at an inflection point in American history and remember how it directly impacted you. And I wrote about this in my book. My wife was a 9/11 widow who I grew up with and knew. So to remind everybody that we can never allow this to happen again is so important. And, I'm in New York today just to be there as part of that memorial. So I just want to thank you for that, John, and for your listeners for remembering how important this day really is.
A very important day in our history. And, we say don't forget. A part of that is don't forget how it happened. And we let our guard down, no question about it, and allowed that to happen. Which then brings me to the president's first planned then canceled meeting with the Taliban in Afghanistan. A lot of people criticizing the timing of it, that even if it went down, having it this week, based on, of course, what you just said, probably not the best timing judgment the president had. Of course, he had to cancel it with the Taliban. A lot of other people saying he shouldn't have really had the meeting in the first place at Camp David. What say you?
John, I want to make sure that we eradicate the Taliban and ISIS. And if there is a way to bring peace to a region through conversations that the president can help facilitate, we have seen this so many times throughout the course of our history where the U.S. president has served as the ombudsman or the person who is trying to bring multiple sides together. And look, I think what this president wants, and what I think all of the American people want, is they want to see our U.S. troops withdrawn from places that don't have a primary interest for the United States to be in any longer. And I think of Afghanistan. And if the president can help facilitate that, look, I wasn't offended by the timing, and I think some of this might be a little fake outrage by the media to continue to attack and go after the president. My family, as I said, was directly impacted on 9/11, has changed the directory and trajectory of our lives because of that. But that doesn't mean I don't want to see the president get to a resolution. And look, whether it's done today or tomorrow or sometime in the future, we have to get this done. But the other thing we have to do, John, is the president has the authority to release these 9/11 documents so we can find out what really happened and hold the people who are responsible for that accountable. And I hope they do that. They declassify that information so that some of the victims and family members can have closure for that. But as it relates to this potential discussion at Camp David, the media wants to portray the president as bad timing. But when is there a good time to have a conversation with Taliban and others to try and bring a resolution? There's never a good time. So the faster we can do it, I think it's better for everybody.
Well, I'm in agreement with that. And the president's instincts are to solve problems, to negotiate and get things done. And he wants out of Afghanistan or simply a drawdown. You're not going to be able to do that without some kind of a negotiated settlement between the parties. And he believes that if he gets involved in it, he might have an opportunity to do that. Here's the way I look at it, Corey. If it fails, it fails. I mean, he got elected as the disruptor to do things in a different way and try different ways to get things done. So worst case is they have the meeting, they can't get an agreement, or the president doesn't feel comfortable that the Taliban can fulfill any of the promises they makes. And we're back to square A where we are now. I don't see the downside.
No, I agree with that, John. I agree with that. And again, I think the media wants to harp on and portray this president as sometimes callous or unplanned or erratic or whatever they want to say. I don't believe that to be true. I think he's just a man who wants to solve problems, and I respect that.
I respect it too. And you can't solve problems if you don't get directly involved. There's a lot of things that he would like to get involved in, just like when he said that he would meet Rouhani, president of Iran. I mean, we have a dispute with them. Meet with him, talk to him. And it's amazing. When I grew up, the Democrats were the party of diplomacy, meetings, conversation. Don't do gunboat, don't fire missiles, don't rattle sabers, go meet and talk. Now, because it's President Trump that wants to do that, now all of a sudden they completely change their position. It's laughable what the Democrats are doing now. Let's get to John Bolton, fired. I was not a supporter of Bolton ever, as you know where I stand on a lot of these issues. But, the president has a right to work with whoever he feels like it. And the guy was just a bad fit in there. So I don't know what the big deal is.
Well, look, once again, John, the media wants to portray the chaos, the perceived chaos in the White House, the change of personnel. The truth is, this president, as you've said, is a disruptor. He wants to do things differently, does not believe in having men and women who serve in our uniform in harm's way if it's not strategically important for the President of the United States. And the President wants to solve problems. And look, I respect John Bolton for his tenure as both a UN ambassador and as a national security advisor. But when you have a disagreement with the President or multiple disagreements about the shape and direction of the U.S. foreign policy, only one of those two people were elected to serve in their capacity, and that's the President of the United States, and he made the decision, and we have to respect that decision.
That's what I think. Why he hired Bolton, I don't know. I'm not a fan of his. He's a neocon, warmonger, and is not consistent with the president's instincts on foreign policy or his America First agenda. But look, there's a lot of people that he's brought in there. He likes to get different opinions. I respect that also. I mean, I think that's a good thing. That's a healthy thing that he likes to get different perspectives. And at the end of the day, he's accountable. He's going to make the decision. I just don't know what the big deal is. But as far as I'm concerned, to be honest with you, Corey Lewandowski, good riddance to John Bolton. This is John Fredericks Show with Corey Lewandowski. It's 9/11 Remembrance Day. 18 years ago today, the towers went down, as well as the attack on the Pentagon. 3,000 Americans died that day, many more wounded and harmed. And as we remember that, we gave a moment of silence earlier. Lewandowski looking at running for Senate in New Hampshire. He's in New York today for the commemorative ceremony. Corey, big win last night for the Republicans in NC9, North Carolina 9. They spent a lot of time there. The president going there Monday, pulled out the victory. A good sign to come?
Hey, John, a really important win for the Republicans going into the elections of 2019. And those elections we talked about, obviously, in Kentucky, in Mississippi, and Louisiana. This was a race where the Democrats were clearly very focused on. They had recruited a very strong candidate, Marine Corps veteran, who was young and energetic. It was a seat, as you know, and your listeners know, that had been held by Republicans for 60 years. But that being said, it's become very competitive, as has the state of North Carolina. And we saw the president and the vice president go down to North Carolina to campaign for now Congressman-elect Bishop. And he pulled out a victory by about 3 percentage points. And so that's important because you could already see the narrative in the media saying, well, if Trump loses this one, it's a reflection on him. It's a reflection on, his style, and this is a precursor for 2020. That narrative is now off the table. Mm-hmm. So a big night for the Republican Party and a big, important night for clawing the Republicans back into the majority in 2020.
What do you think of all these retirements? Another, 12 or 15 Republican congressmen incumbents retired. A lot of them were never Trumpers. A lot of them are not really on board with the America First agenda. And, of course, the lying legacy fake news media saying that that's the end of the Republicans having any chance to win. Why is having old candidates that don't stand for the president's agenda retire a bad thing? What am I missing here?
John, you're not missing anything. And clearly you and your listeners know this. This president has reshaped the Republican Party. He's reshaped the Republican Party to allow individuals who believe in fair trade, not free trade, but fair trade, to be forward-facing. He's reshaped the Republican Party to say, hey, the way that we've done things for 30 years, meaning you are the establishment, you are the problem, are no longer going to be acceptable to us. So that's very important. And by the way, we should want that. Having new people come to Washington, D.C., we should encourage. I believe in term limits. I didn't ever think that people who get elected to Washington jobs should be there for the rest of their lives. We see this, many of these members go in very young, they stay until they're very old, and then they say, well, now we've got seniority, you've got to stay another term. It's just crazy. So I like to see turnover in Congress. I don't think anybody says, boy, I hope you go there and spend the next 60 years in Washington.
I don't think so either. And I don't think it matters. This idea that these people retired and that's the end of the Republicans taking back the majority, I think is probably about one of the silliest narratives. I think the Republicans are likely to get much better, much younger, much more energetic candidates for these seats that are much more in tune with President Trump and the America First agenda. And what you said is, I agree 100%, the reshaping of the Republican Party for now and into the future. I don't think they're going to go back to the party of the Whigs of Mitt Romney and John McCain and George Bush 1, George Bush 2, Dick Cheney, and all the other losers. I don't think they're going to do that. So, look, we hold the majority now. Let's get candidates in that can articulate the president's agenda with vigor and with clarity and with courage, like Corey Lewandowski is going to do in New Hampshire. This is why you're going to win. And that's the platform for victory, not running away and hiding like some of the Republicans are doing right now in Virginia, why they're losing. I mean,
that's right, John. John, you know this. You see it. John, you travel the country like I do.
Right.
You see what happens. When people embrace the president's agenda, they are successful. We've seen it now for the last 4 years. And those who have run from the president, who've kind of pretended that they want to help him but don't really want to, they're the ones that lose, John. And
right.
It's not surprising because you can't be halfway in. You're either in and you agree with the America First agenda, which is making sure that we're taking care of our country first, or you don't. And those that embrace that agenda are going to win, and they're going to set a new course for our country going forward.
Let's. I got one more question. We're almost out of time, and that is the USMCA. I just had Congressman Morgan Griffith on, Republican, Southwest Virginia, 9th District. I had a lot of farmers down there suffering because we can't get USMCA passed. And he said something. Griffith is not a bomb thrower, all right? He's just not. And he said, look, Nancy Pelosi is allowing Americans to suffer by the day who could benefit from USMCA. She's allowing them to suffer financially, emotionally, and otherwise because they can't get things sold under this good program in order for total political expediency. Corey, if you were in the U.S. Senate right now, your hands are tied. You can't do anything in Congress. You can't go into her office. So how do you put pressure on her and other Democratic so-called moderate Congress people to just get the bill to the floor?
Well, look, John, I watched one of the Sunday morning shows, and I saw this Democratic congressman from Pennsylvania on with Maria Bartiromo, and she asked him, are you going to support the USMCA? And he said, well, we've got a plan. Where's the accountability? Okay, these are swing districts that Republicans can win in. I hope the Republicans are running ads against these people right now because what I do know is that these congressmen want to keep their jobs. And when they get up and sign a discharge petition, meaning bypass the standard protocols in Washington, D.C. for discharging a piece of legislation, they can actually get this done. They're so afraid that Nancy Pelosi and AOC, who control the Democratic Party, will make sure that they don't have the resources to win, that they're willing to give up their congressional seats, if you can believe it. John, they're doing a disservice to their constituents, and what I would be doing right now is I would be holding rallies in those districts. I'd be bringing those people from their districts to Washington, D.C. and say, hey, Congressman, right now it's up to you. You make a decision. You sign a discharge petition so that we can get this directly to the floor and you bypass your own leadership, or you won't be coming back to Washington, D.C. And as much as they like Nancy Pelosi, they have their own self-interest in mind, and that's what we should be doing. We should be putting pressure on every single Democratic congressman in a district that we know is going to vote for the USMCA, but has been afraid to do so because the far left wing of the Democratic Party is holding them at bay.
I love that idea. We should hold a rally in some of these, right in the middle of some of these districts, and not a partisan rally, but a rally for USMCA, a rally for the farmers that are going to benefit in the district, and just to bring attention to it and put pressure on them, because I've got a couple of them right now in my home base that, ran around saying they're moderates and they're going to buck the party leadership and they're not squad people. And yet they do nothing out of fear of Pelosi, AOC, Tlaib, the others. They do nothing. And so it's like you sold your constituents a bill of goods because you ought to be clamoring for this. And then they hide behind drug pricing, which is a complete lie. And they say, well, we can't have this because, the patents are for drug companies and the USMCA. They give them a 10-year patent. Drug prices are too high. Obamacare's 12 years, and the same Democrats voted for it, 75 times. So, the hypocrisy. And of course, the lying fake news media never points this out. Only person saying it is me. Unbelievable.
Well, John, that's why people listen to you, because nobody else is talking about it, but that's really what's going on. And so that's why you've been so successful.
Well, thank you, Corey Lewandowski. I know you're in New York today for the commemorative ceremony. Thanks for sharing your story and being with us. And good luck today and this week. I know it's a sorrowful day for you. We'll look forward to getting you on back next week. And a lot of us very anxious for a Lewandowski for New Hampshire Senate run. I know it'll be on your mind after today. Thank you.
Thank you, John.